Okay, so I'm going to set a context relative to the meaningfulness of our age. So I need to have a little preamble a little bit so we're on the same page in terms of setting a context relative to the meaningful of our age. So just kind of flow along with me in this respect. So we're looking at the four elements relative to cycles and phases. Maybe you've been aware of them, but four elements relate to in any cycle or phase. There are basic elemental forces at work, each with specific characteristics. The ancients described these as water, air, earth, and fire. So each of this creates a cycle of water, air, earth, and fire. But within each of these phases is another cycle of water, air, earth, and fire. So keep that in mind as I go along. So for an example, in Genesis, in the book, in the Bible, it outlines Genesis and the four elements. So these are a bit paraphrased, but it begins with water, Genesis, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. So water, air on the second day. God divides the waters above the firmament from the waters below it, firmament. Earth on the third day, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. Earth. Fire, light. On the fourth day, the sun and the moon, stars are revealed. So we see that. And if you notice, if you're biblically inclined, you'll notice the next verse, the fifth day relates to water again. The sixth day relates to air. So there's a cycle, a repeating cycle. Now, if you're not so much biblically inclined, if you're more scientifically inclined, if you prefer to consider four key materials that cycle through ecosystems are water, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So water, carbon, you can say carbon dioxide, what's in the atmosphere from plants. Nitrogen is actually dropped from the atmosphere into soils, and the plants pick that up. So that's earth. And phosphorus. Phosphorus is behind things that are luminescence, things that shine bright, aspects of phosphorus for certain elements. So I thought to just kind of bring it to a larger picture that this repeating cycle occurs in various ways as it's outlined in the Bible or it's outlined in nature. So again, we're setting a context here. So characteristics of the phases within a natural creative water, air, earth cycle. So before we get into our ages, we're going to look at what does it take for a natural creative cycle. So Bob Smith was mentioning about how attitude starts things off. So we're going to look at this in terms of these aspects. So water, you can say stillness, calm, face of the waters, beginning with, you can say right attitudes, and an attitude of affirming what is life-giving is a principal starting point. So recognize how we start. If we want to really start and kind of reverse directions if we need to, is come back to what does it take to be life-giving as a principal starting point for something creative and lasting. And then air, generative attitudes maintained in purpose. And sometimes we might be challenged to stay life-giving, but that's where we need to cultivate our sense of purpose, being aligned with their sense of being, of life-giving. An atmosphere is generated that connects things together. And then once the atmosphere is established, the earth is revealed. And this is where forms appear, designs appear naturally and without force. They come into form. Decisions become discerned. So when we have choices, choices actually, it's just a matter of discerning what the next step is, even if it's just the smallest of steps. Decisions are discerned. That's coming into the revelation, you can say, of form in our awareness. And things reveal themselves. And then fire, design. Now, if the first three phases are in order in a creative cycle, then a design controlled unfoldment. So things kind of, they move along in a controlled way. Then life joy. Part of that controlled unfoldment is feeling a sense of joy as things unfold with, you'd say, a certain order and control. and then a natural result of creative action. So if we look at it principally, water relates to principle, the principle of actually what is, starting point of life giving. Air relates to purpose, maintaining a sense of purpose. Earth relates to design, and fire control. It's like not a fire out from control, but when things like this happen, it's common for fire to be put first, enthusiasm in terms of what can I get motivation. And when that happens, consider a relationship or business where great enthusiasm is followed by an immediate concern for the form of things. So if that's the case, then when fire and form are put first, burnout is likely to be close behind. Okay. Okay, so maybe taking that in a little bit, I just gave you. Now we're going to look at it in terms of how does this relate to us in the age that we're at. So let's look at the timeline of our ages. Now, this is a model for understanding life cycles and phases. It's a model. Okay? It's looking at 7-year phases of a complete 20-year element cycle. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Just hold that thought, but just let me carry on a little bit. Proponents of these cycles encourage reviewing one's life in 7-year segments to gain clarity and identify new beginnings or endings. Like, for example, Rudolf Steiner, sure most of you have heard of him. Okay, he looks at 7-year segments in terms of reviewing your life. So in terms of those 7-year phases of a complete 28-year element cycle, let's look at it here to explain that more. So you can say water, this 28-year cycle relates to water phase. This is a phase of this cycle. And it's when we're from born to 7 years of age. Air, 7 to 14. Earth, 14 to 21. Fire, 21 to 28. Now, I noted some things for each of these phases, and you might have a little different perspective, but let me just share what I have in mind. So you can say from birth to 7, there's a time of innocence. I don't know if you've noticed, like children 7 years or younger, there's a certain angelic quality about them. And scientific wise, biological wise, it relates to the thymus gland. The thymus gland is actually, you can say it more pronounced as a child. And when it is, then you can say something of purity kind of expresses through that child. But then we turn 7 or between this age range, again, the ages can vary a little bit. The way the world is now, things are sped up. But overall, 7 to 14, then awareness begins to open up. The child begins to be aware of, you can say, maybe frictions consciously in the environment. And when a child begins to be aware of those type things, actually biologically, the thymus begins to shrink because it can't be so open to what it was to before, but when there was an unconscious consciousness of just being, a being, say. 14 to 21, this is when interest, sense of belonging. I don't know if you remember your junior high school days. I was a junior high school teacher at one point, and I remember the shift that occurred around 14. Amazing from between 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, the amazing shift during that time. And then, interest, belonging, and then 21 to 28, I articulated as pursuits in terms of what direction you can say we might be moving in life-wise, or maybe not moving in life-wise. So then this brings us to the air phase. And this air phase, 28-year cycle, can be a time of stress for many. So Dorian, I'm glad you're here tonight because I really want to help assist with folks that are in this age range because here, 28 to 35, realizing it may not be too easy, may not be easy. I have some patients in this age range and they come in kind of a bit stressed because they realize, there's a term that's been used, I think articulated by the millennials in terms of adulting. They begin to realize, they have jobs, they have bills to pay, they realize it may not be too easy. And then during this time frame, overall, there's the highest divorce rate between 25 and 39. So if we look at it in terms of 35 to 42, self-awareness, reflection, beginning to realize more what it is to be an adult. 42 to 49, increased realism in terms of, okay, this is what it is. And then 49 to 56, change. A person may experience a midlife crisis where they realize, life, things didn't, things don't inspire me anymore. A change is needed. And then this range, and then increasingly, folks that are older, even older than 56 or 60s or 40s, they call it a gray divorce rate that's increasing. As older folks are actually realizing that they may not want to prolong certain relationships there, and in order to realize that there's something more to life. So change may occur during this time. So it's a time for stress for many, can be. And then Earth, 56 to 63. I don't know when you turn maybe 50 or 56 in this range, you're realizing more what matters. So, maybe you can relate to that. I knew I had that experience, realizing more what matters in terms of thinking that maybe half your life is over, and then, getting on to what really matters. 63 to 70. Attitude and health refinements. Now, as we realize what matters, and during this time, this air phase, you realize you have to see, you can say certain invisible factors in your experience in terms of the attitude you need to maintain, in terms of healthy choices. Like this is the time to really get things more in order before the period of 70 to 77. The reason being, because if you look at the chart here, Earth, Earth. So this is an Earth phase within the Earth overall. It's 28-year cycle. And to me, I look forward to the time when I turn 70 because I realize this is the time of prime influence Earth time, prime influence Earth times. So my realization is this is the time we've lived a good part of our life. We've experienced certain things. We've realized certain things that work. And if we're healthy enough and positioned enough, we can make the greatest impact in our lives in terms of maybe in our work or our influence with our families, with our friends. Just this is prime time. Okay. Then I noticed 77 to 84. Now I've been noticing folks in this range from 77 to 78. Things begin, like we were talking about before, things begin to start to be mitigating in terms of maybe physical capacities begin to shift. There's a mitigating earth influence, and it's possibly if we stay healthy enough, maybe it may not bother, may not mitigate it as much. But I've noticed with patients and with friends, the time between 77 and 78 in that range, things begin to be mitigated. And that's what Robert was talking about too, is adjusting, navigating. What does it take, as Christine was saying too, what does it take to still offer an influence, but with the capacities that we have? Fire, 84 to 91. Now here they've noticed as folks move through a creative cycle and if they've set enough stage, gratitude increases with age. 91 to 98. Now, some people might get more cantankerous, but we're talking about conscious health here. What does it take to be consciously healthy? So gratitude plays a big part with that. 91 to 98, gratitude for a long life, the experience of, for a lot of folks, the attitude they may have. 98 to 105, appreciation of the present. So I've done a little research on that. They've noted folks in this age rank, they just appreciate being present. It's almost like coming back to, you can say that time of innocence when we're up to 7 years old. And then 105 to 112. Now, you might think, who lives to be 112? But there has been people, but thousands of people are now living between this range, 98 to 105, thousands of people. But they notice at 105, it begins to sharply decline in terms of transition time. But folks have lived to be 112. There are folks on the face of the earth, for example, this Louise Jean Signor at 112. She was noted there to be alive, and this is what she had to say at 112. Stay single, eat Italian food, and stay active. So that was her advice at 112. So maybe he can relate to that, maybe not, but I thought that was fun to bring in. Okay, let's look a little bit more. Phases relative to years, weeks, and days. So let's break this down. Now, you think about, again, I'm just emphasizing that prime time of 70 to 77, but you can relate to this to whatever age 7-year phase that you're in. So if you're 56, you can say that's a water phase. If you're 70, it's water. So you can think about the age range that you're in. So it has the characteristic of water. Water relates again, to coming back to principle. What's most important? Are you life-giving? 72, 71 to 72, air. Now, the air phase sometimes can be a little stressful because the more invisible factors are coming to fore, and learning how to actually hold attitudes and maintain a sense of life-givingness. 72 to 73, the earth phase. This is where things become to be more grounded. And here, this phase, this is the earth phase of the earth cycle of the earth year of this time frame. So you can say between 72 and 73, that's, you can say that's prime time, generally speaking, prime time. 73, 74, fire, the nature of fire there, of actually refining further. Again, repeating, 74 to 75, water, 75 to 76, air, and then 76 to 77, earth. So maybe, afterwards you can review a little bit more of how I've kind of articulated each one, the characteristics of each one, and then see how it relates. Again, see how it really rings true with you. This is my perspective, but see how it works for you. Now, if we want to take it a little bit further in terms of weeks, you can think of Monday as being a water day. And if you notice on Monday, I look to keep this certain stillness during that day because things could be impactful there. And then air, you can say Tuesday. I don't know if you notice, sometimes Carol and myself call it Super Tuesdays, where a lot of things are conspiring in the air. And sometimes it takes a little extra effort to maintain a life-giving attitude there. Wednesday, Earth, you can say the nature of the week is actually unfolded. It is what it is for that time. Thursday, fire. And I like actually my classes doing them on Thursdays because I feel like it's the fire day, a day of expression. Friday, beginning the weekend, a water phase. Air, Saturday. And with air, you can say at this point here, the Saturday time, you can say relate to when you're 75 or 76. On Saturday or Saturday afternoon, there's a lot of ease. If you notice that, if there's just an ease in the air on a Saturday, where folks aren't at work, you can say certain vibratory factors in the air are more relaxed there. So this is more of a relaxation time compared to say Tuesday. And then Sunday, you can say it's the dawn of a new phase. And if we break it down to a day, the morning time, again, for a lot of folks, they begin their morning with some kind of routine to actually get them ready for the day. You can say get them ready, oriented on principle in the morning. And the mid-morning unfolds there as things conspire for the day. The afternoon is the earth time, the fire, the evening time, and then characterizing a little bit more, the morning time is a tone setter. Early morning is a tone setter. The mid-morning is sometimes navigating variables, you can say, in our attitudes. Afternoon, recognize it is what it is for the day. And then evening time, appreciation and refinement. So we just continue along those lines. Characteristics of the phases within creative cycles. So water, so just think about water. It's affirming what is true through stillness, bringing some quietness within your heart there. Air, generative attitudes maintaining a life-giving attitude, a love-giving attitude. Earth, letting forms appear naturally and without force. This can apply to our life years, it can apply to our weeks, and it can apply to our actual days. Decisions are discerned. Fire, fulfillment, acknowledge what has been accomplished. So at the end of the day, evening time, acknowledge what has been accomplished. And then acknowledge also what can be refined. For some of us, we use the term sanctified period of time in the evening and morning, and recognize that certain things you may have learned from the day or things you could have done better. But taking that in terms of how does that apply to your your life there, whether it's years or the weeks or the days, making our days count, no matter what age we are. So timeline of our ages meditation. So let's just take a moment. Again, usually I give a bit of content to take in, but just to slow down a little bit. And let's just have a meditation time here. And how I usually like to do it is upright yourself. You can put your pen, papers aside, upright yourselves. And maybe if you're comfortable putting your hand over your heart, and if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you put your left hand over your heart, your right hand over your left, uprighting your spine, and then just beginning to breathe. Breathe in slow and out slower. Yeah, breathing in slow and out slower. And imagine breathing through your heart. It's a little bit of a heart math exercise. One more time. Breathing in through your heart and out slower. And in the acknowledgement of what's been shared tonight, and then discerning what actually struck your mind and heart, let that be held as you can say, a certain treasure of possibly letting our lives, your life, be renewed, seen in perspective, given value at the age that you're at. But whatever comes to mind, consider that. And breathe, find that feeling, feel the feeling of it. And breathe that feeling in through your heart and out through your whole body. Again, breath in and out. And then acknowledging that we're all here individually to make an influence, to contribute, again, no matter what age we are, to let something of life-giving be extended through this whole world. And we may play our parts, you can say, as the crowning creation. Blessing the earth, blessing each other, and letting the light shine through each of us, together as one. Just breathe it in one more time, breathing in and breathing it out. Okay. You can wiggle your fingers a little bit, and when you're ready, you can just let them drop and open your eyes again. And now let's continue on. Okay, let's personally consider. Now here's the learning loop here. So after reflecting, after hearing some insight, okay, what was insightful for you in this consideration? Possibly how does it relate to the age that you are now? So let's take a couple of minutes there with a piece of paper and a pen and consider accordingly. What insight is most valuable to you?